So this is my favorite saying by Jack Kerouac, because in the end you won't remember the time that you spent working in the office or mowing your lawn. Climb that goddamn mountain. I, I love that. I mean, and I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to walk around. I can't stand on the podium. I'm sorry to the camera back there, but I can't stand up there behind a podium. I got to talk to you guys. Like she said, my name is Vaughn. I was born in 1967. I was born with hemophilia, which is a rare bleeding disorder. And I was fortunate enough to be born in 1967, which is when the plasma products were invented that started saving hemophilia lives. The year that I was born, the life expectancy of a hemophiliac was under 20 years. And that's because once you start to bleed and you can't stop bleeding, eventually you die. And so that's what happened to hemophiliacs before me. Now, unfortunately, there was a heavy price to pay with the plasma products that we got. Obviously, there was a huge amount of good that came because it started saving our lives, but at the same time, what people didn't realize was it took thousands and thousands of people donating their blood to give me the plasma product, which would keep me alive. And the problem with taking the blood from thousands and thousands of people is that you're not only getting the protein factor, factor VIII, you're also getting everything else that these people had, ailments. And those ailments included things like HIV, hepatitis C, and other blood-borne disorders. So in the 80s and 90s, 90% of all hemophiliacs in the world contracted HIV and or hepatitis C, and then 90% of those people died. So you can imagine the majority of hemophiliacs actually disappeared from the face of the planet. It was almost completely wiped off of the planet, actually. All of my friends growing up that were hemophiliacs are dead. Everybody that I knew in the hemophilia community. And actually, I thought that the hemophilia community died. And honestly, I thought I was going to die. When my family doctor called me in as a teenager to tell me that I was HIV positive, he couldn't even look me in the eyes. He looked at the floor, and he told my parents and me that I was HIV positive and I had fewer than 2 years to live. And I don't know how you guys feel about your doctors, but as a hemophiliac, I held my doctor on a pedestal because he basically was keeping me alive for my youth. And now the person who had been keeping me alive just gave me an ultimatum and told me that I had fewer than 2 years to live. And it was devastating, especially as a teenager. Facing death as a teenager, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. At the same time, I think it was actually a pretty amazing thing that happened to me, and it transformed me. But initially, I fell into a dark place. I knew that I was dying in 2 years, and I knew the way that I was going to die. So I fell into a dark place, and I started drinking, and I started doing drugs, and I just basically was waiting to die. And I stayed in that dark place for those 2 years. And fortunately for me, I somehow made it past those 2 years. And then, as most of you guys know, almost every time we do anything that's inspirational or life-changing to ourselves, it starts with a simple thing. It starts with a question. And for me, that question was, am I actually going to die? And I started realizing over time that I wasn't going to die. Then I asked the next important question, and that question was, if I'm not going to die, is this the person that I want to be? In that dark place, locked in my room, doing my drugs or drinking my alcohol, smoking cigarettes, brooding over life, constantly sad about the life that I had been handed. And I knew in that instant that the answer was no. I mean, as a child, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist. I had all these great, grandiose plans, and those plans got shifted in an instant by being told that I was going to die. And now that I was living past it, I started facing the reality of life, and that's the same reality that we all face. We are here, and I do have dreams. I do have lots of fun things that I want to accomplish in my life, but I felt like I was being held down. But just like we heard a couple minutes ago in the talk, the one that was holding me down was me. Because I was the one who was pinning these things on myself. And in that epiphany, in that instant, I instantly transformed myself. Because I knew the answer to that question. I do not want to continue living like this. If I'm going to live, I got to stop this. So I did. I quit the drugs. I quit the alcohol. I got a fantastic girlfriend that supported me. Now she's my wife. She helped me through that troubling time and helped stand me up. And she made me into the man that I am today, along with the hemophilia and the HIV. Then I kind of got on a plateau. So I started working, and I was doing good things in life and everything was going smooth. I was staying very quiet about my HIV. You guys probably remember the stigma that was associated. Actually, when my doctor told me, it wasn't called HIV, it was called GRID. It was called gay-related immune disorder. So anybody that I did tell, their first question was, I didn't know you were gay. And then the second question was, when I told him I wasn't gay, oh, you're an intravenous drug user? So, I mean, this was something that was very hard for me as a young man to handle. So I kept it inside. I didn't tell anybody except for my closest friends and my family. And it was this deep, dark secret that also was kind of eating at me and ate at me over time. But I knew that I wanted to do something in life. And having hemophilia, I was told my whole life, you can't lift, you can't run, you can't ride a bike, you can't skateboard, it was can't. Everything was you can't do anything, basically. But here's the things you're allowed to do. You can bowl. Now, I'm not knocking bowling, but I mean, come on, that's my one option that I have. So I basically was a little bit of a rebel as I got into my early 20s. And I was literally on my way to work, sitting on a subway train. In DC, we have the subway train, and on the walls of the subway train, they have these advertisements. And I was asking another question, because this is how we do things in life. If you want to accomplish something, sit down with yourself, get into your, Fabak? Get into your Fabak, and ask yourself some serious questions. Well, the question that I had while I was sitting there on the metro, surrounded by other sheep, going to work, was, what am I going to do? I need to do something. It's the next stage of my life. I've got to do something. All right, I've straightened myself out. Everything's cool and everything. And I looked up, and there was an ad, a poster across from me on the metro. And it was an immediate epiphany. It was a poster that said, AIDS Marathon, run to support people living with AIDS in New Orleans. And my initial thing was, that's what I'm gonna do. I was so excited. I was very happy. I was ready to rip, roar, and go and do it. Well, I called my wife and she said, you have hemophilia. You can't run a marathon. No hemophiliac has ever run a marathon before. And you can't. We need to call your doctor. We need to talk to him. And I knew if I called my doctor what he was gonna say. And sure enough, I called my doctor and he said, no. Absolutely not. It's not possible for you to run a marathon, first off. Secondly, you'll do so much damage to yourself that you'll never walk the same again for the rest of your life. And you probably won't finish the marathon, and it'll be a big disappointment for you, so don't do it. And so, being the radical that I am, I took his information, I crinkled it up, and I threw it in the trash can, because I knew that this was something that I could do. I knew that just like anybody else out there who goes through something extreme like a marathon, I'm capable of it too. And I knew that with the help and support of my friends and family, I could get through this. And I'd just have to alter the training some and come up with a good plan that would get me that marathon. And I'll tell you what, it was tough. I've got a target joint. My left knee almost has no cartilage in it because bleeds that I had when I was a kid. And so all the cartilage got eaten up by my bleeding episodes. I had several bleeds during my training. I had a bleed in my right ankle that I thought was going to be permanent damage to the point where I thought I might be getting an ankle replacement. And on top of that, I had what some of you guys might go through, and that's a burst Achilles tendon. My Achilles tendon burst when I was on my 12-mile training run. And all of these things piled up against me, and basically they were obstacles in my way telling me on a regular basis, it was a good shot. You made a good shot at this. You made a good effort, but in the back of my mind, I kept saying to myself, but you're just not cut out for a marathon, You did everything that you could, and you tried, but I didn't want to listen to that voice in the back of my head. I didn't want to listen to the constant complaints from my body. I had a mission, and I wanted to accomplish it. So I stuck, and I stayed focused on my goal. I found new ways to train around the injuries that I had, and just a couple weeks before my first kid was born, my daughter, I ran a marathon in New Orleans. I raised more than $3,500 for people living with AIDS, and I ran a marathon. I have hemophilia, a bleeding disorder. It's impossible for me to run a marathon. Well, I'm standing here in front of you guys telling you that I did it. And then after that, I continued. I kept a daily journal. And the reason for the journal at the time was because I assumed I was dying, so I wanted to have something that I could pass on as a legacy. I had passed on to my mom and my dad and, my wife and anybody else in my life that would be interested in reading about the things that I had experienced and I had been through. And one day I was typing in my journal and my wife walked by, and I'm typing it because I'm an IT guy. I don't write in a journal, I type it. It's in a word processor, and she looks and she sees 100,000 words. And she says, 100,000 words? How many words are in a book? And I said, I don't know. So I Googled it. I think it was Lycos at the time. And sure enough, books average in range from 80,000 to 110,000 words. And I had 100,000 words written down. And she said, she kind of hit me, She's like, you've got a book here. Now, there was something that was really troubling about that because, again, that was another eye-opening moment for me. It was a moment in my life where I was like, I've wanted to be an advocate. I've wanted to inspire people. I've wanted to get out there. But I also had this dark secret that I'd been keeping for almost 20 years in my closet, and that was that I was HIV positive. Now, if I published a book that on the cover said I'm HIV positive, suddenly I would open up to all my coworkers, all my friends, all my neighbors, who, by the way, in the 80s when we found out that I was HIV positive, we got death threats, we got threats to burn our house down. I was kicked out of my community swimming pool. So I had these scars that were there that basically kept telling me, you can't publish that book. So it was another obstacle in my life that I had to overcome. And I also had to overcome it with my soulmate, because I had somebody in my life who also had the same secret that I had, we were keeping together. And by publishing that book, I'd be also opening up the world to the idea that she's married to an HIV positive person, which was scary. But again, that's just an obstacle. It's just one of those things that's going to come up to you in life. We had an obstacle last night on our way here. Fred and I sat for 2.5 hours in his car parked on the highway and had some wonderful conversations, but it was an obstacle. There's obstacles all around us all the time. But those obstacles can either be a stopping point in your life or they can be a turning point in your life. And so I did publish my book. And when I published my book, I then found out that there's actually other hemophiliacs that are still out there. And I found an entire group of thousands of people who were looking for people to lean on, who were looking for people to be advocates and to be inspirations for them. So it was a really life-changing event for me. Not only that, it was healing. By putting my story out there, I finally stopped. I was living a lie. By not saying that I was HIV positive to my friends, I felt like I was lying to them. And now it was out there, and it was something that we could have in discussions. I found out that the stigma was not anywhere near what it had been in the 80s and 90s, and I got nothing but love and support poured out at me. So it was a support system that I was missing out on all those years. I didn't even realize was there, and yet suddenly became available to me overnight. And around that same time, I made several attempts at climbing Mount Rainier, which is a mountain in Washington State. It's 14,412 feet. I've made 3 attempts on that mountain, and so far the closest that I've been is 100 yards to the summit, 100 yards from the summit. And I'm not done, though. I'm going back to that mountain. That mountain will be mine, and I can tell you, as sure as I'm standing here in front of you guys, one day I will climb that mountain. The last time that I went up there was 100-mile-an-hour gusts. And at 100 yards from the summit, we got approached by a ranger who said he was afraid to come up there to beg us to come off the mountain. We were the last group of climbers on the mountain. And we finally decided it was just so dangerous in the conditions we were in that we were going to come down. Now, that's an obstacle, and that's a decision that I made in my life that I don't regret. There's also obstacles in your life that are there for a reason, right? If we push that extra 100 yards, maybe we make the summit, but then maybe we die. because of that decision that we made. So you also have to weigh some of the obstacles and the decisions that you're making in your life. And you never know when those obstacles are in front of you if this is the obstacle that I have to worry about or whatever. You got to go with your heart, you got to go with your mind, you got to think about things, and you got to be very careful and calculated with your decisions. But you got to ask yourself questions, and you got to figure those things out, and that's how I've done it. Now, recently, you guys see the picture of my family in the center there. My wife and my kids. My wife and I didn't think we could have kids. You know, we were told that we couldn't because I'm HIV positive. My wife is not HIV positive. I don't want her to be HIV positive, and I obviously don't want my children to be HIV positive. But through the miracle of modern science, there was a new technology that came along called in vitro fertilization and a new form of in vitro using ICSI. And my wife and I didn't have to adopt kids, which was a direction that we were considering. We actually were able to have kids. And now I feel like that, I mean, I don't necessarily believe in blessings or miracles, but at the same time, over and over again in my life, I've been blessed. I've had miracles happen to me over and over again in my life. So it's funny to say, like, you don't believe in something, and yet it's right in front of your eyes, and you see it happening to you on a regular basis. My kids are a blessing. It's something that I thought for my entire adult life that I couldn't have. Now I have two, and they're crazy, and I love them. They're just amazing people. And I wouldn't have it any other way, but if it weren't for the modern science, you know, not only would I not be here because of hemophilia, then I wouldn't be here because of HIV, and then I wouldn't have the children that I have. It's just amazing. It's like thing after thing. And I always tell people we live in such an amazing, cool time. Because not only is, you know, the planet's obviously shifting in a lot of different directions, and we're getting a lot of really neat things, but we're also getting miracles that are happening on a daily basis from science. We were talking earlier about Alzheimer's and stuff like that that's going to be cured. I believe firmly that we're going to be curing some of these things in the next several years. In the next couple decades, we'll cure cancer and heart disease. We're all going to live like 30 or 40 years longer. And that leads me into what I want to talk to you guys about my survival pie. So I've come up with this thing that I call survival pie. I believe that we can all use survival pie to live a little bit longer. When I found out that I was HIV positive, I had a lot of friends. I read a lot of books. I did a lot of research. I studied gurus. I went to coaching seminars and stuff. I wanted to figure out, what can I do to prolong my life? How can I live longer? And my religious friends and pastors and folks in that area approached me, and they told me, I know how you can live longer. You got to leave it in the hands of the Lord. You have to pray on a daily basis, and you have to find your inner spirituality. And once you've found that spirituality, that's how you'll survive HIV, and that is the only way. And I had doctors who told me there is only one way to survive when you have HIV or any kind of illness, and that is to follow your doctor's orders, to take the medicine that you're told to take, and take it on a daily basis and never miss a dose. And that is how you do it. And I had a lot of fitness friends, people who are in the fitness arena, and they told me that the only way to have a longer life and to stay healthy and strong throughout your life is to use fitness and strength. Strength training, cardiovascular exercise, all of these different things, and that is how you're going to live longer, and that's how you're going to beat HIV. And along those lines, I had nutritionalist friends, and they told me that by having a healthy diet and eating the proper foods, avoiding trans fats, right? Everybody knows about trans fats and the ugliness of those now. Drinking more than 90 ounces of water a day, and eating healthy, nutritious meals. That's the only way that you're going to survive and live longer dealing with HIV or any kind of illness. And then I had a Tai Chi instructor and yoga instructor who told me that the only way is through meditation and deep breathing and by finding my inner self. And I had, obviously, everybody has their positive thinking friends, right? And those positive thinking friends told me that the only way to survive something like HIV is to find your positive side and stick with it. Surround yourself with positive people, do positive things in your life, and maintain a positive attitude at all times. And that's the only way to survive. And then I also had psychologists and folks along those lines that told me that by leading a stress-free life, you will keep your immune system strong. And that's the only way to beat HIV. And what I found along the way is that it wasn't any one of these things. Every single one of those folks were right. And that's why I call it survival pie. Because so many of us get caught up in, I need to lift weights. And that's what's going to change my life and make everything good. But that's not necessarily true. That's just one piece of the pie. You guys can take all of this stuff too in your lives. It doesn't have to be HIV. You want to add 10 years of quality life to your life? Well, combine these things, and I guarantee you, barring an accident, you add 10 years of quality life to your life, maybe 20 years in the age that we're in by combining all of these things. And so that's my survival pie. It's my super secret sauce. And this is how, I'm here more than 30 years after being told that I had fewer than 2 years to live. And I'm here standing in front of you guys, alive and kicking. And all that I did was combine those things and utilize those in my life to make it to this point. Now, I know my time is running short, so I want to tell you guys what I do real quick in 30 seconds. The first thing that you have to do, if you want to achieve your wildest dreams, if you want to do the kinds of things that I'm talking about, if you want to publish a book, if you want to climb a mountain, if you want to do anything in life that's really tough to accomplish, you need to have goals. And in order to have goals, you need to have a desired outcome. You need to know precisely what you want, and then you need to write down those goals. If you don't write down those goals, you are not going to accomplish your wildest dreams. Period, flat, final. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, I've got goals, but they're in my head. But that's not true. If you're building a house, if you're climbing a mountain, if you're driving across the country, don't you have stuff written down that you're following? Those are your guidelines. Why wouldn't you use a goal to create your wildest dreams and follow through with those? The other thing is time. The number one question that I get from people is, how on earth do you have time to do the things that you do? You keep a blog going, you're a writer, you do all these fitness things. I'm an IT guy. I travel the country and I do inspirational speaking. I'll tell you how I have time, because I wake up earlier than everybody else. I wake up at 4:12 in the morning, every morning. I wake up and I do my workout before everything, so that before I even start anything in my day, my workout's already done. By the time most people are waking up, I've already done my workout, I've already written something for the blog, and I've already written part of the next chapter for my book. I accomplish more before 6 a.m. than most people accomplish in an entire day. And that's how you do it, because in the middle of the day, you can't do it. We have too many things happening. People are texting you. You're getting emails. The kids are asking for stuff. People are coming into your office and telling you things that you have to do. You can't accomplish it in the middle of the day. And by the end of the day, you're dead. You need to do it at the beginning of the day. That's where you accomplish your wildest dreams. And the last thing is to stay focused. Obviously, staying focused on things in today's day and age is very tough to do, but if you can't do that, you can't accomplish things. Now, I've got a challenge for you guys. The challenge is, you come to things like this, you read books, you read things by self-help gurus, you listen to the CDs and stuff like that, you hear all these talks, and we all get really spun up, we get really inspired, right? And we go, wow, what he was saying, what she was saying, that was pretty cool, and yeah, I want to do this in my life, I want to do that in my life, and then we go home, and then life gets in the way. Well, my challenge to you today is to go home after this with the inspiration that you've got from all of these fantastic speakers that you're going to hear today. Go home and take advantage of that. Don't just go home and say I was inspired. Go home and be inspired. That's my challenge to you. Thank you, guys.